Hello there, this is Terry, and welcome to another episode of the Animation Industry Podcast. If you have an animated show idea you want to pitch, this is your episode to listen to. And that's because I chat with Dave Padbury, a development executive with Guru Studios in Toronto, about the entire pitching process, the do's and don'ts of pitching, the number one thing you can bring to the table as a new creator, and a unique behind-the-scenes look at what a development team does with your pitch once you leave the room. But first, a little bit more about Dave. Dave joined the Guru development team 6 years ago to work on True and the Rainbow Kingdom, and since then he has helped develop the upcoming Disney Junior series Pikwik Pack, the CBC comedy Big Blue, and many other series. Currently, he is focusing on supporting creators' visions across all of Guru's upcoming series and finding new voices and perspectives to fill Guru's slate into the future. Now, without further ado, let's jump right in. So, hi Dave, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing
no
today?
Worries. It should be fun.
Yeah. We met a while ago, and I'm happy that we're chatting about your career and animation and everything. And so, yeah, I'm pretty excited. So let's talk about development. Why did you end up pursuing development in the first place?
Why did I start? I've always had a passion for development. I didn't know what it was called, but as a little kid, after I saw Toy Story, I left the theater and I started creating basically very rudimentary show Bibles for other shows about toys. I started making the toys out of pipe cleaner. I'd make boxes for them. I'd take crayons and write on the back of those boxes the other toys in that series, and I just would create these brands that were Toy Story derivatives.
Please tell me you still have some of those.
I'm sure my mom has kept some. She's kept all sorts of bizarre things.
Wait. So how? I don't know if you want to age yourself, but how old were you when you started doing this? It sounds like you're pretty young.
I was probably about 6.
Oh, wow. Oh my gosh. Yeah. So you started making pitch. I've never heard of that before. Usually people are like trying to make their own comics or whatnot, but you were like...
I didn't know what a pitch Bible was. I didn't know how to tell a story. So I would just write character descriptions. And then I'd kind of get to the end of all the papers I had and I'd be like, and they do stuff.
Oh my gosh. Can you remember somebody specific that you created?
I created a whole bunch of markers and crayon characters. That was in first grade. And each of them had a superpower. And I made like a booklet describing what each of them did.
So the real question is, when are we going to see markers and crayons come to the big screen now? Because you're working in development. You have all the resources and tools, the know-how. Come on. So you were making characters out of markers and crayons. How did you end up, where you are now, working as somebody in development? What were the steps in between? Tell me about that a little bit.
I feel like I just woke up one day doing this. But I thought that the way that idea would that passion would manifest was as directing live action films. And so I went to film school. I focused a lot in screenwriting, a lot in documentary. And the further away I got from that kid, the less happier I was. I did some on-set work, and it wasn't really for me. And so I kind of was wondering, like, I loved animation, but there wasn't an obvious path into it for me because I'd come so far into this film world. When I was not on set, I was watching Adventure Time. When I wasn't in film school, I was watching Adventure Time. And I was able to navigate into this world because I took an internship at Guru Studio. Guess I made a good impression there. I forced my way into development meetings because at that point I realized this is where I want to be. And I took decent notes. They kept me around in the production office as an asset coordinator. So I was helping with schedules and making sure that the assets were delivering on time for a TV show for Data Pause.
I want to rewind a little bit. Yeah. So why did you, I do want to get into this because I think it's really interesting, but why did you think going into live action was your forte into, or whatever the term is, into kind of building an animated series or series is?
I didn't realize how robust and awesome the Canadian animation industry was, I think, when I was like 14, 15, 16 years old. Gotcha. So I didn't think that I had a career there.
So, okay, so you just kind of didn't see any immediate opportunity. So how
Yeah,
did you, so you were working in live action. How did you end up
I
taking
was
the,
not working in live
oh, you
action. I was
weren't. Okay.
volunteering in live action.
Volunteering.
I was stumbling around film sets.
Very, like coffees and stuff, or like doing lighting? Like what were you doing?
Um, whatever I could get my hands on. I was an assistant AC on reshoots on a feature once. That paid a little bit.
Nice.
I was possibly the worst assistant AC. I couldn't even tell you if I was second assistant or third assistant. That's how bad I was.
Oh, well, it's a good thing you switched up, I guess. So how did you end up getting the internship at Guru? You just were an assistant on a film, and then suddenly you're like, I'm gonna go get an internship in animation. Tell me how that actually happened.
I think I was a case of right place, right time. There was the development producer at the time, Leslie Solowenchuk, who's fantastic. I somehow got my hands on her email and I chased her. And I think that they were looking for interns at that time, and it worked out.
So you just said, "Hey, I'm new to the scene. I'd love an internship. Can you hook me up?" And she's like, "Cool, yeah."
I sent her a script I had written, and she was
Oh,
like, "This
what?
is terrible. Come be an intern."
She said that?
No, she was very nice about it, but
So you were an intern. What were you actually doing? Like, were you animating? Were you working in development?
I was spent most of my time in the production office on Ever After High doing whatever they'd let me do, and
Okay.
whenever I got to be in a lot of production meetings, take a lot of notes, and whenever I wasn't doing that, I was trying to figure out how I could help out the development department.
Gotcha. So I think it's interesting because a lot of people I talk to, they're at their first job or they're doing an internship and they're trying to like do animation.
Yeah,
And you weren't doing that. You were like trying specifically to get into development, and you're like sneaking in development meetings and like,
yeah.
were you actually sneaking in just like,
Oh
oh,
no,
hey,
no, no,
I'm just
no,
sitting
no. I was
here.
like, hey, do you need a note taker? Do you need a note taker today? And one in three times, one in four times, I'd hear yes.
Okay. That's actually really smart. Like a good way
Company
to
was
get in those
growing at
meetings.
that point, and I think there was it was very much like a right place, right time thing in hindsight. Like no one else has ever had that same opportunity that I had at that moment since.
Fair enough. It also sounds like you were really trying to like you were like a go-getter, trying to get every opportunity and you could. So
I
so
honestly wouldn't say that, but I'll take
no? Okay. All right, sometimes. So how did you manage going from intern to actually working in development? You're
I
sitting
was
taking notes in a development meeting and now like tell me about the bridge.
I was on a show for a while, and I learned a lot about production in that time. And when I found out that the development assistant at that time was leaving the studio, I went home. I thought long and hard about it. I called my mom. I'm like, "There's an opportunity. What should I do?" And she's like, "Email them. Like, what are you going to do? Email them." So I spent days laboring over this email and about how excited I would be to be the new development assistant. And I sent it to the VP of development and the development executive. There was a few months there where we kind of had a few conversations, and it turned into the job.
So when they said, "Hey, you don't have too much experience in development. I see you around the office. Why would you be perfect for this role?" How did you end up persuading them?
I think it was, again, largely a case of the right place at the right time. I think one small thing that worked to my advantage was that while I was working in the production office, I was also developing a concept for a web series that over the past year had been turned into a pilot that was optioned and turned into a pilot, a live action web series. And so it wasn't so much the product of that, but the process of that I think may have lent me some credibility.
Yeah, so it sounds
And
like you were like doing stuff on the side to like
yeah,
this is completely on the side from your job, I
yeah,
guess,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So how did you end up getting it optioned for $1? That's amazing. That's kind of, and also why $1?
I think the person who optioned it believed that there needed to be, I don't know the legal term for it, but due consideration or something. So without payment, the contract would seem would not hold up, but with payment of some kind, the contract would.
Gotcha.
Um, he was really talented assistant director who was looking to start his own production company and was looking to get some IP to be the foundation for that. And to me, I think the promise that he would shoot the pilot of it was a huge incentive there to, and it wasn't really about whatever small option fee would be available.
That's pretty incredible that you got also a pilot shot and made. Like, how did that whole process feel?
It was like lots of excitement and then big disappointment when it didn't go anywhere. And I think development is that process over and over again at a very fast speed. And then sometimes that excitement just keeps on building and building until it gets greenlit. And then once it's greenlit, it's still another year and a half. So I think that first experience there kind of helped me level and ground myself for that roller coaster ride.
Nice. Do you think so? You went through that whole experience, and you also work in development. Is that like common for a lot of people that work in development, that they've actually?
I think so. I think like everyone comes into development through a different door. My colleagues, one of them studied architecture, the other studied film production.
Architecture, that's interesting. I've heard that a couple of times before, actually. Yeah.
I know there's lots of writers who work in development. There's lots of more business-minded people who work in development. I've worked with my old boss was a lawyer by training, but a very, very experienced writer and story editor and showrunner.
So for somebody listening and they're thinking about getting in development, what kind of person does it actually take to really thrive in that role?
I think it takes a few skills. I think one of the things is that you need to be able to invest yourself emotionally in every project, and you need to be able to raise each of them as if you're one of your children.
What does invest emotionally mean? Like other than, I'm passionate about this, but like, what does that mean? I'm just wondering.
I think you have to find your way into its soul and how to relate to the idea and care for it and nurture it. Like, I think a parent whose kid is really into baseball might not understand baseball, but still has to be able to understand that matters to that kid, and then research it and get excited about it and take them to games and cheer for them.
I think that's a really good analogy. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
So I think that's what it is sometimes, and other times you were like, oh, that's exactly what I'm into. This show is my soul. Nice. And if you're the parent and you're also into baseball, but you have to have just as much fun both ways. And I think I've been very fortunate with the development slate we have. It's a lot of things that were very easy to find my way into. We're working with lots of really funny, exciting, cool, innovative ideas. And so I think with all that said about putting yourself into the idea, you also have to try your best to remove your ego from the equation, because there is a creator. There is going to be eventually a broadcaster. Maybe there already is a broadcaster. There might be a rights holder who's different from either of those two. There's the rest of the development team. There's the good of the company. There's the business interests. And at the end of the day, your goal is to try to get the best idea possible through all of those. And I think all of those people are bringing great energy to the project and great ideas to the project. And so it's about finding cohesion. It's generally not about being another voice in the room. It's about finding common ground and similarities and doing what's best for the idea.
That's really, I really like that. But I was trying to like list all the stakeholders you mentioned, and there's like a dozen different parties involved. Are you in the middle of everybody?
It really depends on what's happening. I think sometimes you're in the middle and sometimes you're at the periphery. Because a show is a very long journey through a lot of different departments, from its conception with the creator sitting alone in the room, or around the boardroom table, or anywhere in between, through legal negotiations, through creative development and business development, onto the production floor, to sales eventually. And all of those people bring a lot to the project. Yeah. And all of those people have certain needs out of the project. So you're not always in the middle of the conversation.
Gotcha. So what is 99% of your time spent doing in a development role?
I think it's giving script notes and Bible notes, coordinating schedules and deliverables, and trying to source talent, writers, designers, and whatever else is needed that day. Educational consultants on a educational preschool show, doing research on the market that show is going to be competing in, and then also on the things that show is about. So it's kind of living between the world of the business needs of the show and the creative needs of the show. Writing Bibles, story editing Bibles.
Sounds like you have
every day is very
a
different.
ton of different responsibilities. Like it's very varied and diverse, I guess, what you're responsible doing. Can you give me an example of, you said like script and story, like the notes? What would a note be that you put on a project?
It depends on what is the goal for the project and where it's at. I think when the notes are creative notes, I try to make sure that the emotional beats hit harder and that the jokes land harder.
Gotcha. So not funny enough?
I think it's generally, I get what this joke is supposed to be. Let's set it up stronger earlier.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think it's being another set of eyes, but I think really what I'm most focused on when I'm reading a script is this character's emotional journey making sense.
So you actually see all episodes, I guess, of a show before they're even made? Like you go through everything ahead of time?
No, we would generally just be doing a pilot script, possibly 2 scripts. The most scripts that have gone through development on the show before it hit production was 8.
Oh, okay. So your role encompasses everything that happens before production starts.
I'm part of a big team that is involved in that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay. So tell me, like you mentioned, there's so many different things that you're involved in. Like, what do you really get out of the role? Like, why is this a really good fit for you? Like, what do you love about it?
I love that seeing these ideas thrive, seeing a character go from an idea in a writer's head. Yes, I said that right. To a whole bunch of different designs that all have fun ideas and unique voices to them, but might not be hitting it immediately. And seeing that design be refined and then become a CG render. And that's just so rewarding to be a part of that process. Or vice versa, seeing a really hilarious drawing from a creator who's more of a designer, and helping that character find their purpose in the story.
Yeah. So can we talk about the creative voice and the purpose a little bit more? How do you, like you said, you do things like, this joke should hit a little sooner. How do you how did you learn to get better at that? How did you learn to like really hone a creative voice, or like the pilot? Like, did you take writing classes? Like, how do you get better? How do you develop that skill? I guess I'm saying, like,
yeah,
I feel like I can jump in on any script and give it feedback right now, but I don't know if my feedback is really valid towards the project. So how do you refine that?
I hope I refined it. I think everyone that asks themselves that all the time when they're giving notes.
Oh yeah.
I think you largely listen to your gut. Yeah, I've read a lot of screenwriting books. I've watched a lot of TV, but I think it really is just asking yourself, does this make sense? Or how would I tell this story?
Yeah.
And if you write it down, think about it for a second, ask yourself, is this different or is this better? And I think a lot of the times I'll throw down a lot of notes that are just different, and then I'll pull back.
Okay. So actually that's a good point, because it's not, you like actually take some time, you like export everything you're thinking, take some time to think about it, and then really refine. So I'm also wondering, like, say I want to get into development and like there's a application and I'm applying, how can I really showcase that I have a skill like you just mentioned, to that I'd be a good fit for the role? Like,
that's a good question. I did it by writing.
Yeah.
I think if you're in the business, what you can do is you can point to the show that you helped shape.
Right.
But if you're not, I think write stuff, produce. If you're trying to get in the door, produce a small short film and on that project, give script notes, shepherd it through the pre-production process.
Nice. Okay, makes sense. So actually, I do. There's one topic that I kind of want to talk about with you, and it's around like the concept of pitching itself. So, because you've gone through the process personally and actually gotten something optioned, which is I think incredible. And you also do this on a daily basis. I know that people send you pitches, I don't know, daily or whatever. So what, like, I've talked about pitching on this I was going to say show, this podcast before from like a creator perspective, but I haven't talked to too many developers. So like, one question I have is, what is the biggest misconception when it comes to pitching, like new creators who are pitching? Like, what is the biggest misconception that you like to tell them about?
I think, and I'm probably stealing this line from someone else, but it's that everyone there is rooting for you. Everyone wants to hear a great pitch. And I think when you're sweating before you walk into the room and you're nervous, that's normal. But I think every person I have ever myself pitched or been a part of pitching has been supportive. And I think the questions they ask aren't to tear your idea apart. It's to try to understand what may have been missing. Because I think you rehearse that pitch, you finesse it, but you know the idea so well that you might forget some of the big pieces of the puzzle. But the point I'm trying to make is everyone's rooting for you.
That's good. That's good to know, because like I've pitched before and it's a little bit scary sometimes when you're sitting in a boardroom and there's all these people, you've never seen them before. And they're like, here's the owner of the studio, here's like the development director, et cetera. But I've also pitched where I'm, talking to one person and I know they're going to bring it to their team like a couple months from now at a pitch meeting they have. So how do you make sure that your idea, not only do you get it across right to the person you're pitching, but then you give them the tools they need to pitch it to their team? Because I know that's a thing too.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think the making a good impression in the room with your pitch is awesome. But at the end of the day, your pitch is going to be discussed in a meeting a week later alongside a few other projects. And no matter how excited people were in the room, it's they might not be able to bring that excitement to the back or share that excitement with their team. So I think you have to instill in that person the same passion for the idea that you have. I think the way I've personally found works the best is telling them why the show needs to exist, telling them why you created it and why it needs to be in the world. And not everyone executive is going to agree with you, but you will find someone who agrees with that passion and that reason.
Is like, I want to be a show creator and I think this is a cool idea, a good enough reason for it to be existing in the world?
I think if the idea is cool enough and you can articulate why it's cool, I don't think it needs to be a noble purpose that makes the world a better, healthier place. But it's I think indicating that this show will be cool on these terms, and if they agree with you, you're set.
Fair enough. One thing that I've heard a lot from random places, I don't even know who at this point, is that studios are looking for similar shows that are already on air or that other studios are doing. Is that, like, how fair of a statement is that?
I think there's some truth to that. If a show's a hit, another similar show will be a hit. But I think when you're there is obviously a tipping point. Yeah. And there's also limited space on that raft. But when you're a new creator, I think you probably won't be able to get your idea to the same level of polish as the other hundreds of pitches that are competing for that small turf. So I think your best bet is to go out there with something different, something fresh, something that represents who you are, something that's your calling card, something that voices, again, connects to that passion that this show needs to exist.
Yeah, I think that's a good
already.
I think that's a good point, because I was just thinking, exactly what you said. You know, if a similar show already exists, I'm sure every studio is already trying to develop
Exactly. Yeah.
something anyways to compete with that. So, so
And
let's talk
then
about
they've
the
got
individual
teams of
creator.
animators. They've got all sorts of resources at their disposal to go in with the shiniest version of that pitch.
Right. Yeah, that makes
What
sense.
you have to offer as a new creator is your perspective on the world, your experiences, your art style, and I think leading with that unapologetically and letting someone else tell you slow down a little bit. You
Okay.
have to be familiar with what the TV landscape looks like. I think, you can't pitch like a Stan Brakhage abstract short film series, but you can pitch, Midnight Gospel obviously had the backing of like Pendleton Ward and Duncan Trussell, who are both established. But if you go out with something that bold and that different, people will notice you. They might not option that idea, but maybe someone will. It might not get greenlit, but you'll make connections along the way. And if your art is looking that cool, that different, if your perspective is that cool and that different, someone will put you in the writer's room. Someone will have you design some characters for their other pitch.
That's an interesting point. So maybe the end goal for a new creator isn't always, or for somebody who's thinking of pitching, isn't always to actually just get your show. It's to get your foot in the door, so that whatever you can bring to the table can.
Absolutely, yeah. Every pitch is a job interview. You don't know if you're going to leave the room with that show moving forward, but that's another reason I always encourage people to pitch ideas that are close and personal to them, that they're their passion projects. It's because they will be able to show more of themselves, more of their capabilities, more of their perspective in the room.
Yeah.
And if you pitch a show all about how much you love baseball, and it's not the right show about how much you love baseball for that moment, but 6 months later, that company is developing another show about another sport, they'll be like, hey, let's get the baseball guy in here. He likes sports.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting because it takes a lot of confidence to go forward with something that's very uniquely you, because like me being in animation school right now, like not knowing how, not being a part of the industry, I guess there's all these like speculative thoughts I have of like, what do people want to see versus like what they're showing me in school. Like I have to draw this way for it to get noticed, et cetera. Right. So I think that's interesting. Are there any classic do's and don'ts of pitching that you wish more people knew of?
Again, pitching is all about authenticity and being your best self. It's a first date. So you want to go in and be honest to who you are and show the best version of yourself. I think a lot of advice I've heard out there is like, go in there and know your vision and don't move, don't budge. I think there's some truth to knowing your vision. You have to go in with a clear vision. You have to go in with confidence. But if someone asks you, how do you feel about that character? I think you have to show the level to which you're flexible and be honest about this. If that question is a boundary for you, don't move. That's fair. But if that question is actually not core or foundational to the reason you want to make this show, I think being flexible on those boundaries is important.
So I guess having the strong vision also correlates to like, what is the purpose of the show? Like for instance, like say I'm like super hung up on a secondary character, but maybe that doesn't even like, maybe we could take out that character and the core vision of the show still stays. Is that like a good example?
Yeah, for sure. And I think if something is cutting into the core vision of the show, it's probably not going to be a good match there, or they haven't understood your pitch. And stand your ground on that point.
Yeah.
If they ask you, what if this didn't take place in this country? And you're like, that's the country I grew up in, and that's why it takes place there. And the customs and the traditions are part of the DNA of this show. I think that will be respected and that will be understood. Yeah. And even if it is a silly reason, even if it's not like, this is who I am, I think that face looks funny and that's not changing. That's fair, but know your boundaries. Don't be as flexible as you can be, while not compromising what you're passionate about.
That makes sense. So it's like, I really like this character having red hair just because, versus they have red hair because it relates to their backstory of, I don't know, whatever. So like
Both
being
of
able
those
to
are
back up.
valid answers.
Okay.
I think. Um,
All right. So so another thing I've heard a lot about is kind of knowing the market. Like, like what if I'm super researched on like kids age 10 to 12 and
I
what they
mean,
want, and like I come in, I'm like, this is what the market says, like this is perfect. Like, is that a strong position to come in on?
I think it depends on how versed in the market you are. I think knowing your idea is absolutely essential. If you've spent a week or two doing research, I probably wouldn't share it. I think you're pitching people who do this every day, and if you show up with a lot of focus on the business and you're not from a business background, it is a it draws question to how passionate you are about the idea versus how passionate you are about the money this idea will bring you. And I think also it illuminates the holes in your idea if you aren't as versed in that research as you think you are. If you come in and you are genuinely deeply researched on a subject and you can speak to it really impressively, that's awesome. Like, I think that creators come from all backgrounds, and if your way in was through that route and you landed on an exciting idea and an awesome idea at the end of that path, I think that's totally valid.
Yeah, makes sense. One thing I want you to speak to, because we talked about this beforehand, is the idea of a story engine. So
Oh yeah.
as far as I understand it, a story engine is kind of the base of where the idea can spawn a million episodes, and it's like
Yeah.
you like never run out of ideas. And that's something that I had a hard time, I guess, learning at the start when I was going through my pitching journey. But can you just speak to what is a strong story engine and how do you build one?
A story engine is what makes every episode of a show about the same thing and what propels every narrative. I think Paw Patrol is a great example about this because every episode is about the team of dogs rescuing someone. They're basically an emergency services team. So the story engine of that show is their job. CSI is another show where the story engine of the show is their job. All those police procedurals follow that same DNA. House. And then you have story engines that come from the character's personality, like SpongeBob, where it's about his constant search for fun and impulsive ability to create fun out of every situation he's put in, and then taking that character and putting him into the mundanity of adult life, like flipping burgers or going to driving school.
The episodes almost write themselves, right? Like
Yeah.
you don't even you could just like say like, okay, SpongeBob in a museum, and already you have like a million different ideas, right?
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
I think that is key to it. It's when someone hears your pitch for the show, they should be able to envision like 1,000 episodes of what it could be. And most of those, it's fine if they're terrible, but they should get that gut feeling of, oh, I know what the show is. I know what the show will always be. And I think there's definitely room in finding a good, strong story engine for complex serialized storytelling. Like Game of Thrones, it's all about the battle for the Iron Throne. Every episode advances that plot forward. Your story engine can evolve over time. A lot of sitcoms come through the gates with a really hooky, high concept story engine that you totally forget about at some point. But I think having that spark that ignites these stories is really important, because that's what makes an idea for a TV show.
I mean, it sounds obvious and kind of simple, but I know it's kind of harder to do in real life. Is there a formula for like building a good story engine? Like,
I don't think there is. I really hope there's not. I think that would take a lot of the artistry out of it. But I think that it's about ensuring that there are elements in conflict perpetually.
Okay, that makes sense. So like like I guess with Game of Thrones, it's like the battle for the Iron Throne, and it's nobody.
It's SpongeBob. It's childhood naivety, adult world.
Right, right. Yeah. That's, I mean, it sounds so simple. Like, okay, I'll just make a pitch on that. So let's talk about behind the scenes of pitching, because I think you have a unique look as like a really big studio in Toronto that does a lot of great things, and you see tons of pitches, I'm sure. Can you take me behind the scenes of what actually happens? So say somebody comes in and pitches and then they leave. What happens after that? What happens to the pitch after that?
If we're all feeling like it's something that's going to be a good fit for us, and it's something that we can get behind and really make happen, we try our best only option things that we feel really have a good shot with us of getting made. We try to keep our slate lean. We try to keep it small. So if we're feeling good about it and we option it, the next step is to work with the creator to kind of flesh out the idea, and fill in any of the spots where they have weaknesses and complement their strengths. Our goal is to show off the strengths and bring people to the table who round out the project. So if the creator is an artist, it might be bringing a writer on board. If the creator is a writer, it might be finding the right designer for these characters. We build from there. We create the pitch material that we feel will put the show on its best legs and show off its unique strengths. If it's really slapstick and goofy, maybe that's some storyboards and animation test. If it's really heady and talky and funny in dialogue, maybe it's a script. Maybe it's just making those character designs pop by putting them in a context where they can really be appreciated, like a comic, or like we try to be creative about how we present our ideas. It's not about being gimmicky about it, but it's about putting it on its strongest legs.
Nice. It sounds like there's so many things that kind of have to line up for something to get made. Like the pitch goes well, the studio believes in it, they put together their own pitch, then a broadcaster has to buy into it, and then I guess once a broadcaster
you're in the broadcaster development phase, and you're doing a similar process again, where they're looking to create the materials that they feel the rest of their team will need to see to buy into it and greenlight it. So maybe that's a pilot script, maybe that's an animation test, maybe it's market testing or research testing, and you're at that point working with the creator to bring the best version of that and the see the show shine through whatever process they want to put it through.
I mean, it sounds so like intimidating, and like it makes sense because, you know, if millions of dollars are going to go behind creating a show for years, then you want to put all the research and thought into it. But it seems like so drawn out from like a high level perspective. Like, oh, you know, do any pitches just like fly through the process, or does everything kind of go through this rigorous stage?
I mean, I think there have been cases where things have moved faster, but I think it is. We have, in fact, gone straight to production on shows before when we've brought it to a broadcaster and they've loved it. And they've asked a few questions. We've done a bit more work to show them what the idea is really about. And it has gone straight to series. It really does depend on the idea. It's not languishing. It's always, everyone is working to make it stronger, make it more whole and complete.
Okay, so by the end, it's actually a much better and more developed idea too.
Yeah. I've never seen an idea hit the screen worse than it came in, and I feel like creators that we've worked with have always been able to like keep their stamp on things, stay really involved, and keep driving the creative process through the whole thing.
Gotcha. That's good to hear, though. I'm just curious about numbers. So, how many pitches a week, or let's say a month, do you usually get? You're one person of your team at a studio here in Toronto. How many pitches do you personally get emailed to you?
We see a few hundred pitches a year.
Okay, so a few hundred. That's like one a day, then.
Yeah, probably averages out to about one a day. Yeah.
Okay, so then, how many do you option on average, if you don't mind sharing, a year?
As I said, we try to keep our slate lean. I think probably 3 to 5 projects a year.
Okay, so you have a 1% chance, I guess, versus all the other pitches that come in.
But I don't think that's really fair, because
Yeah.
there's lots of studios out there, and I feel like those questions that we ask when we're trying to figure out if we should greenlight if we should put something in development, every studio is going to have different answers to those questions.
Okay.
And so I think your odds are, it's tough. Like, it is very tough, but you should create things and you should put them out there if you're passionate about this. If you really, really want to put something out into the world, the odds aren't against you. There are more and more broadcasters all the time, and there are more and more studios all the time.
I like that outlook. I'm like, the analytics side of me is like curious about the numbers.
That's fair. Yeah.
So let's talk about the shows that you have ended up greenlighting. Are there, like, I'm wondering, because every studio wants to kind of stand out, and because it's a competitive place to get a show made, are there certain risks that you take with creating a new show that you're hoping?
I think you have to take risks, and I think you have to take risks on what the soul of that show is, because as I was saying, like, there's gonna be so many people competing to have the next hit in the spirit of whatever the big hit of last year was.
Yeah.
And some people are going to succeed doing that, and they will make a great show. There is nothing wrong with doing something that's tried and true and doing it better than anyone before you. But I think we try to find something different in the soul of the things we option, and we try to be different and take risks in that way. We're not we're taking risks when we see a creator who is taking a risk that we find inspiring. Because if we find it inspiring, someone else might find it inspiring, and that spark is contagious. And that's what I was talking about earlier, when you leave the room and you leave that this show has to exist behind.
I think I was just going to ask that, because, if you find it inspiring, how do you know the audience is going to find it inspiring? Especially because, like, at Guru, you're predominantly making shows for preschool and kids, right? So, I mean, as an adult and you're excited about it, how do you know kids like 3 to 4 to 5 or younger are going to be excited about it too? How?
I mean, you don't know, but it's not about taking risks that are righteous, and it's also not about taking risks that are pointless. It's about taking risks that are fun and exciting. And yet, when you are looking at as many pitches as any development executive is, you kind of start to see the things that stand out.
Yeah.
And they stand out in the same way to you that they do to a young child flipping through the channels. It's more instinct than it is like a well-reasoned, articulate argument. Often, even if you can argue it articulately, it is this intangible feeling.
So it's more emotional based, I guess you could say, rather than like, I guess, tangible. Like, people will like it because there's a cute character versus like, I love that cute character.
Yeah, exactly. And if you feel it, you'll be able to articulate why the show needs to exist.
Okay.
But if you have to put it into words first, it's not. There's not a spark there.
Nice. Do you have any other final thoughts on the whole pitching process, or anything we didn't cover? Really? Wondering?
I think there's one more piece of conventional wisdom I want to question a little bit. I think the advice is often given to do your research, and you do have to do your research on that channel. You can't walk in and pitch something that's totally off. But I think test the boundaries around what a network is interested in doing and what they're willing to do. Because if you had taken that advice, you never would have walked into Disney Channel with the Owl House.
Right.
And the Owl House is awesome. Yeah. And admittedly, it's from Disney Studios, and it's
I was surprised when I saw it was from Disney, actually, when I first saw it.
Yeah. So I think the same way that we're taking risks with the projects we're optioning, that means every time we go and pitch someone, it's a little bit of a risk. And I encourage people who are out there in the world pitching to do the same thing.
Nice. So I'm wondering, maybe kind of as we wrap up our chat a little bit, can we talk about, there's somebody else, we kind of chatted about this at the beginning, but there's somebody who's been listening to this and they're interested in development and they want to get in. Do you have any advice you think that they should follow or that you followed yourself that really helped you find your place in this role?
What everything I believe about development is about putting yourself out there honestly, and I think you have to do that, and you'll get rejected because of that, but you will find the right home for your idea, for yourself, if you live your life honestly and you make your art honestly and truthfully to you.
Yeah, I think that's really good actually. And I can think back to like my business career when I was first applying for jobs out of school, and I applied to like the big brands where I thought I would love working for them, but I just really didn't like the corporate atmosphere. But then I was also like let down when I wouldn't get those roles. But I ended up finding like smaller companies, and well, I worked at two smaller businesses and really thrived in them and really found that that was my place instead of the big corporate environment type of thing. So I think being true to yourself and understanding that and being honest, you might get rejected, but if you keep with that attitude, you'll find a place where you fit right in and it'll go well.
Yeah. And I think you will get a lot of no's, but you will also get that yes. And if you don't put yourself out there, you'll get a lot of maybes.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Do you have any other final thoughts as we wrap up our chat? I
hope I've covered the important things that I was planning to come on here to talk about.
I think you did. I think it was great. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast, Dave. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun.
Well, and if you're listening, thanks for tuning in. And I hope you found this really insightful as I did. So that's all for now. Thanks for listening. Okay, bye.